Ideasicle Podcast with your host, Will Burns.
Yes, welcome to the Ideasicle Podcast. Very excited about this episode because, you know, when you go to a cocktail party and there's some people who just suck the energy out of you, and then there are others you talk to who you gain energy from. Well, Leslie M. is very much the latter. You're going to leave this podcast overflowing, I guarantee it. Not to set it up too much or to put too much pressure on her, but I know her well enough to know that. As a former TV host, creative director, and ideation specialist turned training diva, Leslie M. knows a thing or two about creativity and has made a career out of making others more creative. She was a group creative director at Canada's largest ad agency, MacLaren McCann, with clients like Nestlé, GM, Microsoft, Bacardi, and others. In 2009, she focused on the areas of study she found were truly moving her clients' businesses forward, and those three things are ideation, collaboration, and presentation skills. And in 2010, she launched 3 Training, and it's been unstoppable ever since. She trains many of the world's top ad agencies like Burnett, draftFCB, J. Walter, Venables, Taxi, to name a few, as well as leading innovators like Disney, Pepsico, Boston Scientific, and others. In addition to 3 Training, Leslie delivers workshops all over the U.S. for the Association of National Advertisers, develops and delivers part of the Institute for Communications Agency's CAAP course, is certified by the Creative Problem Solving Institute, I love that one, and is a sought-after keynote speaker. She's about to launch a company focusing on creativity within larger Fortune 500 type companies called Combustion, and today she's going to train us. Welcome, Leslie.
Wow, best intro of my entire life.
Really?
That was I'm going to write that. Can we write that all down? That was awesome. You have to send that to me. I love that. Thank you so much, Will Burns. I love you.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure. I specialize in introductions.
Wow, you rock it.
Okay. All right. So where did your passion for creativity come from? Does this go back to your childhood? Where does it come from?
Well, you know, I think when I was a little kid, I was a certified wild child. I really didn't follow any rules in any way, shape, or form about anything. And it was tough for me. I really didn't follow the traditional path in any way, shape, or form. And, you know, by the time I was 14, and this was kind of back in the day, I don't want to really date myself, but it was back in the day, and I was a suburban, Jew who shaved her head and dyed it purple, and people had never seen anybody who looked like this. And I remember my mother, when people would look and stare, my mother would say, "She's very creative. She's very creative." And so creativity tended to be the excuse for my behavior. I was just, I wrote like crazy. I wrote songs and I wrote stories, and I was a big thinker and a big dreamer. And creativity for me, I think, very much was an escape from the mainstream. So that's how I fell in love with it.
So it was an escape, or was it an expression of who you really were?
I think both. I think, in the pursuit of creativity, I was allowed to be exactly who I was, and I was celebrated for it. The fact that I could write really well at a young age was always a big differentiator for me. And I think I also understood from a young age that I was never going to follow a traditional path. So creativity became the thing that I knew my life was going to be based in some way, shape, or form, because the rules were different.
Right. So were there people at that time that you looked up to and emulated from a creative standpoint?
Well, my mother was highly creative, and she raised both my sister and I to never accept less than what we really believed that we could go after and get. So all of those great jobs and all of those cool things that, as a kid, you go, I want to be a fireman, I want to be a rock star, I want to be. My mother kept saying, well, why not you? Somebody gets to do that. Why not you? If you want to go after it, just do it. Just go after it. So I was never told that I had to, I never had to follow a traditional path. I was not raised that way. And my mother would always ask me to kind of push the boundaries of my own creativity. If I was writing, she would say, write longer, write bigger, trust your vision because it has value.
That's awesome. My mother always told me to make sure I wore a belt.
Well, at least you kept your pants up.
Yeah, that's true. So tell us about your company. I'm curious about the 3 Training and the workshops. Well, first of all, just kind of ground us in the kinds of stuff that you do with that company.
Well, I started training, as sort of the part that I'll parachute into is I was a CD at McLaren, and I loved the work. I loved being I loved being a creative. Let's say that. I loved the work. I loved the people with such a passion. But what really broke my heart was the amount of work that agency people were expected to deliver on a daily basis, and they really had very little support, very little training that was relevant to them, and it was basically stick a quarter in my butt and out should come huge creativity. And it is not. It's such an unnatural state to be in. You would never ask that of an artist or an author or a poet or a sculptor. You just wouldn't ask those things. They would have time to ruminate and edit and play with it and live in it. Nope. Advertising, quarter of my ass, out comes the work. And it really broke my heart. And I found that as a creative director, I couldn't support my people. I just watched them in that black hole of nothingness, and I had huge empathy for them. And when I would try and find training for them that was relevant, it just wasn't. It was bullshit training. They didn't understand our world. They didn't understand our pain, what we really needed. And it bothered me to the point that I thought, I feel at this point in my career that I'm using my powers for evil instead of good, because I'm just adding to, I'm sort of capitalizing on all of this sort of struggle and strife, whereas I could be somehow using my time and energy to contributing to make it better, because I profoundly love at people. I think that they are, among the most tortured and creative and fabulous and funny people, in the world. And so I left the agency business and I started a training company, and I didn't know what I was doing initially. I just thought I would create the kinds of experiences that I wished I had. I started with presentation skills because I've been a TV host for many years in the UK, so I came to advertising with a huge advantage, and I brought all of that stuff to the training, and people lost their minds. They lost their minds. They said, "This is, oh my God, the best thing ever. Can you do another workshop for me?" And then another. And I realized that I had found my true calling. I loved it with such a passion. I got to be with the people that I loved. I got to be with that people, and I really felt like I was making their experience better. And that's where it all started. So I then did a much, much deeper dive into understanding learning and development and understanding the formality about creativity so that I could better apply it to our world and sift through it and figure out what about it was relevant to us and what I went on my own journey. And out of that journey came first a company called 27 Marbles Training that I started with a partner, and later the evolution to 3 Training, where I really focused on what I felt were the 3 areas that ad people specifically, and also their their client partners, but agencies specifically needed to succeed consistently. And those were ideation, the ability to consistently come up with brilliant ideas on demand; collaboration, the ability to bring those ideas to life throughout the entire process, because you can come up with the best ideas, but if you can't collaborate through them to bring them to life, they're going to end up dead. And last but not least, the ability to sell the crap out of those ideas, because again, that's where the rubber hits the road. Brilliant ideas, you bring them to life. If you can't sell them, you're dead in the water. So that was what the foundation for 3 was.
So let's pick apart a couple of those. The ideation part. What do you talk about? In this sort of quarter in your ass scenario that you described, how do you train creatives to deal with that kind of unnatural creative situation?
Well, there was a couple of big ahas that I had, as I was doing my own deep dive and applying it to what I'd known from the agency business. And the first thing was that, because creative people have the designation of creative, it's the only industry in the world where you get the word creative before your title, and that gives you a whole different set of rules. And I don't buy into that. I found that there was creativity all throughout the organizations that I worked in from an agency perspective, but they weren't really allowed to contribute in the same way because they didn't have the word creative in their title. So I wanted to break down that mythology in a big way. I didn't think that was true. I think everybody is capable of great creativity, and especially in the agency environment where it's our kind of lifeblood, regardless of what we do. That I think that creativity is something that everybody should be tapping into. And I also recognize that creative people are terrified by the concept of process. They just run screaming for the hills. They really think that the only thing they have at their disposal is their raw sort of gray matter, and that they need to go into that black hole, that place of nothingness alone, and they need to sweat it out. And out they come with some magic, and it really is magic. And I don't buy that by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I think it limits what we're able to do from an agency perspective. So those were the two things that I recognized were really holding agency people back in general, but were the hardest things to get people to buy into.
So is the collaboration part, is that tied to this black hole to kind of bring people out of that to collaborate with others, or am I falsely combining two concepts?
No. I mean, absolutely. They're all very kind of, I hate the trite term synergistic, but they are synergistic or iterative. Call it whatever you want. But I believe that all of the concepts that I've developed in terms of training, like learning and development, are really all tied to each other. It's one big continuum of thinking, and if you buy into the thinking, then it all starts to make sense to you. And the collaboration part is very much, it's an odd kind of thing, because I train, and I use the term completely loosely, those with non-creative designations. I train them on how to work more effectively with those who have creative designations. And then I also train clients on how to work more effectively with their agency partners. So the irony is that when I'm talking to clients, the creative entity is the agency as a whole. But when I'm training agencies, I'm addressing the divisiveness within agencies, that is this notion of having a creative department and then everybody else. So the collaboration is very much about how to have empathy, support, understanding for that thing, that widget that we create, which is, that is the creative product at the end of the day, and how to support it, how to make sure that it breathes life in the most effective and kind of inspired way.
In some of you just mentioned this concept, but you also mentioned in some of your workshops. And by the way, everyone, you can Google Leslie M, EHM, on YouTube, and you can see some of these clips. They're great. But in one of them, you talk about fear, and how fear is sort of the biggest barrier to creativity. That's a very common theme in this podcast. Most people who know something about creativity talks about that, but you talk about it uniquely. Can you talk about how you think people can overcome their fear as it relates to creativity?
Well, there is so much going on in that little fear loop. There's part of it is actually physiological. It has to do with your brain and how your brain is trying to protect you from things it doesn't understand or have context for. That's how we survived as a species, is having a part of our brain that was dedicated to protecting us from things that were scary. And new ideas and innovation are scary to our brains because we don't have context for it. So that's just one of about 12 reasons why we naturally resist our own thinking and our own creativity. You got that little voice in your head that says, "Ooh, don't say it out loud. Ooh, don't do it. Don't say it out loud. Someone's going to slam me for it. Someone's going to call you stupid. Someone's going to say that's not a good idea." And the secret, really, one of the biggest secrets to becoming a more creative person is not listening to the little voice that starts to judge before you can even allow the room to judge. Ideas do not come into the world fully formed. They don't. They come in little tiny spurts and nuggets, and they're like little seeds that are being planted and have the potential to grow. Unfortunately, very often when we're in a traditional brainstorming session, everybody's there with their weed killers and guns and everything, and just putting bullets in everything that we come up with. But that fear of thinking that somehow you have to have the most perfect, pristine idea to present on a silver platter and say, "Look what I have brought forth into the world, and isn't it perfect and fully formed?" It just doesn't happen. And the people who throw that myth away before they even start are going to be far more creative.
Well, it's funny that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's funny that you say that. I think I have some empirical data for you, because when we first started with Ideasicle, I would put all of the experts on the assignment, and there might have been 10 or 12 of them at the time, and it proved to be too many because it wasn't intimate enough. You know what I mean? We've got it down to 4 now because that's intimate enough where they don't feel as much fear throwing out stuff and being wrong and riffing off of each other. Whereas when it's 10, like to your point, it has to be a polished gem if 9 other people are going to see this idea.
But isn't that interesting how just a few extra bodies can actually change how the message that our brains are telling us? That our brains are actually saying, oh, there's only 4 people as opposed to there's 6 or that's 8. I know for you, you've discovered that 4 is the magic number for you, which is brilliant. I try and train people to get into a room with 20 people and not be afraid. And there are certain rules of engagement that you need to follow. And again, all of these things are interlinked, because if you don't follow certain rules of engagement, it's not just about making people feel more comfortable or feel better. The rules of engagement are there so that people have a chance to hear all of the ideas that are being presented, to allow them to inspire different parts of their brains, and to allow more nuggets and more nuggets and more nuggets to come out, so that you could ultimately look at all the nuggets and say, what do we got here? What's that? That's really what creativity is. It's not, if you think about all the greatest inventions, or you think about, I don't know, let's take classic, keep iPod. You think someone went, you know what? I think we should come up with a device that fits in your pocket and that you can load thousands and thousands of songs onto. And I think it should look like this. And I think the functionality should be this. And I think really, there should probably be some kind of an online sort of, hub that you can download. I think anybody did that? No, it's years of people discussing and looking at iterations and flipping it over in their hands. And if any one person in that continuum didn't say, hey, I think it should be really friendly, or I think it should really be hugely customizable, or you know what, I think it'd be really cool if you could create playlists. Like if someone didn't add those little tiny nuggets, and I know I'm giving this really sort of dumb broad strokes, but the thing would not exist as it is. It just couldn't. And every organization that flourishes from a perspective of creativity, and all of those things, the atmosphere is one of acceptance and freedom of expression. And I am amazed by how completely judgmental and negative most agency environments are in terms of developing ideas.
Well, I think your original point is dead on. That why are they called creative departments if ideas can come from anywhere? Those who are not capitalizing on that in this day and age, in this economy, are out of their freaking minds. It's like, why would you have that much, and I hate this term, but this human capital? You've got all of these brains that you're paying for on a daily basis, and yet you actively limit what they can do, what they are allowed to do, and what you expect them to do. I don't get that. You guys, your brain should only be thinking about these things. Okay, you guys over here, your brain should only be thinking about these things. It does not make sense to me. I know that you're the one who inspired me to rant and rave about the pitch whenever I could. And whenever I watch the pitch, I want to beat my head against the wall, because I watch how flawed their process of developing ideas is. Every agency, I watch them all and I think, oh, you people, there's a better way to do it. There's a better way to do it. And when people embrace the better way, the better way is really the easier way. It allows you to come up with hundreds and hundreds of ideas as opposed to 6. They realize that they've been limiting themselves for such a long time. And what I train, by the way, is not some magic, voodoo. It's based on a whole bunch of really sort of clinical theories on creativity and processes. And I've created my own hybrid that I know works for our space, but I can't claim credit for all of the brilliant thinking that went into it. I just went, oh yeah, that's really smart. That's going to work for us, and that's going to work for us, and put together this kind of hybrid experience that allows people to just rock their brains and go places that they wouldn't have gone otherwise. Well, it seems to me, and maybe this is putting it too simply, too simply. Okay, we'll go. That was the same tape loop I got in. But it seems like what you're doing is helping people get out of their own way.
Yes, yeah. Well, yes, but I'm also giving them tools and techniques, because you got it. I was laughing, I'm in the process of writing a book about creativity, and the first sentence is, I hate books on creativity, because what tends to happen is a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them start off with saying, it's really important, just, keep a journal, go for walks, go to the museum, go and visit your inner child. And I think to myself, oh my God, in the agency business, you do not have time to visit your inner child. If you spend too much time with your inner child, you're going to end up at the door. We're not allowed to do that. We have to have this creativity on demand. And yes, we need to be inspired, and yes, we need to allow the world to inspire us, but we have to deliver on a daily basis. And so hardcore concrete tools, hardcore concrete processes, hardcore concrete things that we can fall into and fall back on to help us deliver on a daily basis. So you got to have both. You got to have the thinking, and you also have to have the hardcore, stuff that's going to make you deliver.
What are 3 concrete tips that you can give me and our listeners that we could start doing today that could increase our own personal creativity?
Well, here are some of the things that I think hold us back the most. And they're probably going to dovetail into each other, so it's going to probably become a diatribe, so forgive me. I'm sure we can, at some point go, that was the first tip, and now that was kind of the second tip. First thing is that when you're developing ideas, when you're trying to come up with ideas, there are 2 distinct phases or stages in that process. And if you don't follow them, you start to trip over yourself and get in your own way and limit your thinking. And that is divergence, which is the ability to just go as wide as you possibly can where there are infinite possibilities. There is no judgment. There is no discussion. There is no critique. There is no analysis in any way, shape, or form. It's just literally barfing up as many ideas as you could possibly come up with. And you don't discuss them. You just say, here's more, here's more, here's more, here's more. And there are tons of techniques to allow you to do that. You've got to consider introverts and extroverts in that group setting. You've got to think about how is this being facilitated? Is it limiting it? Is it helping it? Or even if you're just sitting around by yourself and coming up with ideas. If you analyze I'm going to not swear because I'm a trucker, analyze the crap out of every idea that comes out of your brain, you limit yourself as you go. So classic brainstorm. Well, how about if we do this? Well, I don't know, because really we don't have the budget for. Okay, well, how about if we try and do that? Well, I think that's kind of been done before. All right, how about if you just keep doing that, it just sucks all of the life and the soul out of the process. Because what you're doing is you're hammering down your creativity with each new thought. So you can imagine, the further that goes, after 10 of those, you start going, well, now I don't want to say anything. Because anytime I say something, it gets analyzed and beaten down and discarded.
It's sort of like punishing your creativity.
Exactly. That's a beautiful way to describe it. It's exactly what's happening. But if nobody judges anybody else, and we are all just free to barf up as much as we possibly can, and then take once we're exhausted and we come up with hundreds and hundreds of possible ideas, little bits and pieces and potential and nuggets, and then we step back and we say, all right, what do we have here now? And then you start to put those nuggets together, and you start to look for those synergies or those tensions, as the case may be. You start clustering them and combining them, and that's when you come up with things that could not have existed without the group. Because everybody has had some little piece of influence, and everybody now has a role in bringing it all together. So it's not about your idea or my idea, it's about our idea. And it becomes really, really magical. And then you can discuss and question and say, well, how about if we did this? Ooh, what if we brought that piece into it? And how about this little bit of it? And let's discuss it. And that's when you start to come up with things that are truly unique and diverse. Otherwise, you're just going to be killing things as they try and come to life.
Well, quick question on that. Do you believe that the optimum creative state for human beings is as a group?
I think that there is way more potential for diverse thinking in a group because you're a group. I mean, I think inspiration comes from little triggers. You don't know what's going to inspire you. Now, you can trust your own brain. This is another tip. You can follow follow your brain path and let your own brain inspire you, and keep following the weird path the connections that your brain is going to naturally make, and allow that to take you in really new and interesting directions. But imagine if you had 3 people triggering each other's brains, or 4 or 6, and every word that everybody spoke had the potential to inspire the other person to take things into a new and different direction. I think by definition, there's just way more potential there if you can learn how to let go of fear and judgment. Right? I mean, the judging thing, I watch people and I train them to there are certain rules. When we're doing this, we follow a certain set of rules. You don't say someone's idea is great. You also don't say that someone's idea is crap, because they're both judgment. Right? If you're going to say one idea is great, you better say everybody's idea is great. So you're not allowed to say anything. So many people cannot follow that rule. And I hear them, and I come over and go, and they go, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And they start to become aware of the need to say it. And I'll stop them and say, okay, why do you need to say it? Well, I just feel like if I don't say something, we're going to go down the wrong path. And I say to them, how do you know at this point what the right path is? We don't even have a path. And yet you are standing at the end of it saying, everybody come here, this defines success. How do you even know where the path is? What's happening in your brain that makes you so convinced? And what we start to realize is they have become conditioned by the agency process or by client expectations to stand on what they think the client bullseye is. And it's in their head. It's not real. It's completely imagined. They stand there and they say, everybody come directly towards me, or else nothing else defines success. And I think, boy, oh boy, does that not limit what the client can potentially get?
Well, do you think the agency, the way an agency is set up, is basically a competitive environment? Even within a creative department, I am absolutely sure from my experience that they are competitive with each other.
Oh, for sure.
And is that inherently, does that get in the way of this sort of interhuman creative process that you're talking about? Is that part of your workshop, to sort of disarm these people to realize there's a higher good here, and that is the idea?
Well, absolutely. We are the most self-congratulatory industry in the world, because we are probably the most insecure industry in the world. And we need to feel like it was our idea and our name needs to be on, one of the countless awards that we're hoping that we're going to get. And what it does is it alienates us from our colleagues and from the process and from the work, I think, at the end of the day, from ideas. And I just wish that our industry could shift to a model where we win awards as an agency, as a collective. And it can be a client group, whatever, but it's everybody's name. It's not about who was the copywriter, who was the art director. It's here is the team, or here is the organization, or here's the agency that was brilliant enough to collaborate on this idea. Because as soon as you start becoming precious about ideas, what you're doing is not allowing your brain to make space for new ones. Because what you're doing is you're holding on to ideas. I'm going to hold on to this until I feel like it's formed enough so that I can truly own it and say it was my idea. Well, that process is stifling in and of itself. The most creative people in the world and the most confident creative people in the world are happy to just give away their ideas. Just give it away, because they know that in giving those ideas away, they may be the spark, the vital spark that brings the greater idea to life. And they take great pride and joy in knowing that they contributed in some way, shape, or form. Absolutely. And it's a great lesson for creating an environment where you sort of feel like we're all in this together versus I'm in this for me. Great place to end this. What's next for you, and how can people learn more about what you're up to? Well, I'm, as you've said so eloquently in my introduction, I'm in the process of launching a new company. It's interesting because my agency clients are the ones that introduced me to their clients over the years, and I'm doing more and more work on the marketer side. But what I'm finding is that the same lessons and the same sensibilities really have a place far deeper into these organizations, and there's a lot of things that we can do to help organizations use creativity as a productivity tool, really, I guess at the end of the day, is to amp up their potential and get them thinking differently across the organization. One of the most fun things that I do is when I get a chance to work with a really mixed group of people or an extended marketing department in an organization. So I've got project managers and brand people and hardcore marketers, and they all discover that they're capable of so much more creativity than they imagined that it blows everybody's minds. So what Combustion is going to do is focus on organizations as a whole and really trying to ignite that vital spark and then, blow it up and keep it burning across the entire organization with all kinds of programs and tools and products and all that good stuff. So I'm taking it to the next level, baby. And in the meantime, I'm traveling, I'm doing my thing, and I do workshops all over North America with these increasingly diverse audiences. And how cool is it to be the person that gets to go into agencies and help them elevate their creativity? That's crazy cool.
Yeah,
that's the best job in the world.
Cool. That is awesome. So what is your website if somebody's interested in having you speak at their agency?
It's 3 Training, THREE Training, like the number 3, but written out. You can also, Google me. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me all over the place. But 3 Training is the actual website, and all of our workshops are listed out across there. Or you can email me, Leslie@3training.com, and I'd love to talk to you.
Awesome. Well, I love what you're doing, Leslie. I think it's great. We're all in this together, and we all want more creativity out of the human race.
Yes, we do. Go
We've never
team!
needed it more than we do right now.
No, tell me about it, baby. It's we're all working so hard, and we're all rushing towards a dead, and we really deserve to kind of feel better in the process. And we torture ourselves in the agency business. And having been there and walked in those shoes, there are better ways. Better ways.
They're definitely well put. Well, thank you, Leslie, for being on the podcast. And if you could hang on a second, I just want to talk to you about something after the close here. And thanks, everybody else, for listening today. If you have any comments on this podcast or any other podcast, please join us at our Facebook page, and that's facebook.com/Ideasicle. That's sort of the epicenter of where things happen with this podcast and the blog and some other things. So feel free to let us know what you think and pass it around to your other creative friends you think might like it. Until next time, this is Will Burns for the Ideasicle Podcast.